What's up, everybody? IAmAMusicNerd here, and I've been meaning to do this video for a while, but been busy with work and stuff. But we are finally here. Another tier list, best rappers of the 2010s. I'm gonna go over all these rappers' careers of that decade and see how it holds up in a tier list. But before I get into it, if you enjoyed this content, you enjoy these videos, please hit the like button, please hit the subscribe button down below. First one I'm be talking about is 2 Chainz. Now, if there was any rapper that I did not think would have a career that have longevity, it would be 2 Chainz. Because when he came out, with the birthday song, which it's hilarious, but it was a novelty song. And 2 Chainz to me kind of seemed like, one of those like jokey rappers, those punchline rappers, especially in that era where everybody was just kind of doing the Lil Wayne punchline thing. But 2 Chainz had a certain charm and personality to him that was different from all the other rappers. But I thought, you know what? He came out with this great song, and he would be irrelevant soon after. But I think, to my surprise, 2 Chainz is still around. He has grown as a rapper. Obviously, he doesn't do the punchlines as much anymore. I mean, he kind of still does, but he's kind of proved himself to be, a guy who cares about his craft. And with albums such as Rapper Go to the League or that Trap album, Pretty Girls Love Trap, something like that. 2 Chainz has been diverse and kind of expand a little bit. And although for me, 2 Chainz, I kind of liked him more in his earlier stages. It's good to, every once in a while he comes on as a feature and he just kills it. So I think 2 Chainz has definitely, if we were to give like a most improvement award, it would definitely go to him for this decade. So I would put him in the C tier. Alright, the next one, ASAP Rocky. Before I get on this, I know this has nothing to do with the video, but shout out to ASAP for again with Rihanna. That is a true incredible achievement. So shout out to ASAP for that. And ASAP was another one of those guys when he came out with the mixtape, I was like, I'm not feeling this. This is like this swaggy, kind of Houston chopped and screwed rap. I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, I'm not in that mode. And I think ASAP Rocky has become one of my favorite rappers right now. I think what he does is just so interesting, and when you look at him, he seems so unassuming, but he really is a very artsy, pulls in from different sounds, and he's gotten better with each album. I thought that At Long Last ASAP was an amazing project that came out in 2015, and then Testing, which has come to be one of my favorite rap albums in the past 5 years. So ASAP just gets better. He's coming out with new work pretty soon. But, man, I did not think I would be such a huge fan of ASAP like I am. So I'm going to put him in the B tier. I don't think he has made a classic yet. But I think that for a lot of people, they thought that he would become like this commercial rapper, this trappy rapper, but he's actually been a lot more experimental than people have, and I think his mainstream fans kind of fell off of him as the decade wore on, but people like me who like alternative hip hop have definitely grown more of a fan of his and respected him more. Next one, Big Sean. Now, Big Sean, I was never really a huge fan of his. When he came out early in the decade, with Finally Famous and Hall of Fame, I'm like, this guy is like corny, with the ass song, which, whatever, it was just bad. But then he came out Dark Sky Paradise, which was my favorite Big Sean album up until that point. Probably still is my favorite Big Sean album. And then he came out with I Decided, which was, I think, another solid Big Sean project. And I think Big Sean, once again, he has improved and he has gotten better with every single project. I think he has shown himself, like ASAP, he doesn't really care so much about the commercial side. And I mean, of course, he's always going to sell records because of his name, but I think he's a guy who really cares about his craft and he really cares about being a great rapper and not just going for the typical hit songs like he did early in his career. So I gotta give shout out to Big Sean. He's definitely improved a lot in my eyes. I'm gonna put him in the B territory. Alright, next one, Chance the Rapper. Man, It started off so well for Chance. He came out with the 10-day mixtape. Acid Rap was a huge critical favorite. It's what put him on the map. Coloring Book won a couple of Grammys. I love that album since I first listened to it back in 2016. But then the big day happened. I mean, I am a lot more kinder to this album than most other people, but yeah, his lyrical game was not on point. I think Chance was trying to do his own version of Life of Pablo, and it just fell flat. And I think he just listened too much to too many different people, and it didn't have that cohesive sound like Acid Rap and the Coloring Book did. But in terms of being an independent artist and really having an effect and carving a niche in hip-hop, you cannot deny Chance's impact on hip-hop. Because Acid Rap and Coloring Book are going to be classics, I'm going to put him in the B tier. I would have put him in the A tier, but the big day just... Yeah, you can't have that in your discography and put in the A tier, so that's what it is there. Danny Brown, who is one of the best alternative hip-hop artists. I even hate saying that term, alternative hip-hop. I mean, I think Danny Brown is just one of the best rappers, period. And going into his 40s now, most rappers, the older they get, they just kind of like fall past saying they try to chase trends. But Danny Brown has gotten better with age, starting with the Triple X, and that album came out when he was 30, so he finally broke out and got some mainstream attention. Loved that album. Then he came out with Old, another great album. Then he came with Extrasi Exhibition, which if you watch the video that I did with Fancy Memo, was my favorite album in the 2010s. And that's an album that I still listen to often, and I think it's Danny Brown's magnum opus. You know what I'm saying was kind of a step down from Extrasi Exhibition, but still has some great gems there. But I think Danny Brown has had an incredible decade, did not fall off at all. Can't wait to see what he does in the next decade, because he's definitely not falling off. So I'm going to put him in the A tier. Alright, Drizzy Drake, arguably the most popular artist from this genre in the 2010s. Started out with the Thank Me Later album, which is an album that I would say is the Drake project that I've went back the least. It just kind of, aside from a couple of songs, I think was not as cohesive. But I think Drake didn't really find his voice until Take Care, which I think is probably his best project in this decade in terms of just finding a cohesive sound. It really, when Drake was starting to lean on the production from 40 and that kind of nocturnal, woozy, alternative R&B sound, The Weeknd contributes to this project a lot, and you definitely hear that influence over this record. I think it's the Drake record that most fans will say is approaching classic status. But for me, this decade was very much of hit and miss for Drake. Nothing was the same. I know a lot of people like that album, but I just can't really. I barely remember half the album. And then you have, If You're Reading This Is Too Late. I think it's a very solid mixtape. Probably some of my favorite Drake songs of that period. But then you have Views, which is just, I just don't like it at all. And then you have The More Life, which I thought was, pretty decent. I thought it had some good gems in there, especially, with the grime influence on there, the dancehall influence. Passion Fruit, it's a great song from his. Then he dropped Scorpion, and it's just like, what the hell, man? So, like, I think Drake, for me, I just never been a fan of the singing thing. I just wish he put out better projects. He has classic songs that go back to, but really just hit or miss. But if we're talking about stardom and influence over the genre, I mean, you have to put him high in the list. So I'm going to put him in the B tier. I know a lot of Drake fans will say that's blasphemy, but I got to be honest. I just think that his albums just have not been, on the mark as I thought a person a caliber of his talent should be dropping. He should have been dropping more consistent albums during this period, and I just don't think he has. Alright, next one, Earl Sweatshirt, coming out of the Future Cloth. And Earl has had a very interesting decade because, he started out dropping the mixtape Earl which got a lot of critical acclaim, but it was very much like a horrorcore elements that Tyler was doing. But Earl showed early on that he was a spitter on the mic and just an immense talent. Then he got sent away to Samoa, and they had the whole Free Earl campaign. Then he came back with Doris, which is a solid project. But then he kind of took a left turn and released his next album, I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside, which is kind of like a very dark and it's just a very claustrophobic album. And then he does some rap songs, which is even more depressing and claustrophobic. You know, it's a 23-minute album that is like is just like, what the hell is this? But then the more I listen to it, you know, Earl albums are not easily digestible. You may not even like them in the first try, but Earl is obviously from a great producer, a great rapper, a great storyteller. He's one of the best lyrical wordsmiths we have in rap today. He doesn't get a lot of credit, but I just love his work. Like I said, it's an acquired taste, but I think he's one of the best rappers out there today, and I think he had a very solid decade with very interesting projects that don't sound alike from the other. I did not expect Earl to be this mature, introspective rapper, so I'm going to put him in the A tier. Eminem, Recovery came out, and I think it was a solid project. Loved it when it first came out. Don't go back to it as much as often, but I still would admit, you know, that collab with Lil Wayne and was phenomenal, but I'm not into the singles, the Love the Way You Lie, just like, yeah, that's not it for me. But then he came with Marshall Mathers LP 2, which I think was another, you know, pretty solid album. You know, I think is his best album of this 2010s decade. And then he put out Revival, and I don't know what happened. Like, the first half was so good for Eminem, and then he put out Revival, everybody hated it, and then he put out Kamikaze, which is a little better, but still was the whole kind of apologizing for, you know, people, you know, when people get on me for Revival. It's kind of like the apology record, but it's an album that I don't really go back much often. The first half started off so well, and the second half was so bad, so I gotta put him in the C tier. Freddie Gibbs coming out with a lot of stellar projects during this decade. Pinata, he had that 3-song EP that was amazing. That came out in 2015. Then you had Shadow Without a Doubt, I think it's called, which I thought was pretty decent. And then you had You Only Live Twice, which was coming off of his, you know, imprisonment in Sweden. And then he ended it with, a bunch of other side projects, you know, with Fetty and Freddie, which and Alfredo, of course, Bandana. Alfredo came out in 2020, I believe. So no, just Bandana. Bandana came out in 2019, which was kind of like his sequel to Pinata. And I think Freddie Gibbs is one of the best rappers out there right now. You know, I don't think all of his albums hit for me. I don't think all of his side projects hit for me, but I think overall he is definitely blown up since when the decade began. So I'm going to put him in the B tier. Alright, the next one, J. Cole. You know, I'm not the biggest J. Cole fan, as I stated in my off-season review, but I do think that J. Cole, I admire him for the fact that he did it his way. You know, he did not try to go for the radio. In fact, the radio came to him, you know, and he, some point, yeah, after Born Sinner, was like, I'm just going to do things the way I want to. I'm going to have no features. And yeah, that became a popular meme, and it became annoying for a while. But I do enjoy Forest Hills Drive. I thought that was his best project of that period. And KOD, while it wasn't perfect, you know, I do think he tried to do some different things with that record. But didn't really like For Your Eyes Only. Born Sinner I was kind of lukewarm on. Sideline Story was okay. But for the most part, you know, J. Cole has had great features, you know, has had an impact on hip-hop. I think if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have newer rappers like Cordae, especially we wouldn't have Jid, who's on the rise on the Dreamville label. So I think J. Cole proved to a lot of people that spitters, real MCs, still matter and they can still sell records. So I'm going to put J. Cole in the B tier. JayZ, yeah, this was definitely a weird decade for JayZ. He didn't really put a lot out. He only put out 2 projects. Now, I thought the first half of JayZ was very lackluster. I'm gonna be honest. Watch the Throne. I mean, it's just an album that I don't go back to a lot. I think it sounds very dated. Magna Carta, Holy Grail definitely sounds dated. But I think JayZ at the time, his features weren't great. Especially when he appeared on, was it the Paris Morton music track on Drake's None Was the Same album, and then he did this whole thing with the cake, and it's just like, it felt like JayZ was like following the kids, and it just wasn't working well. I think around 2016, 2017, the switch flipped with JayZ, and he finally became JayZ again, and he dropped 444, which was an album that everybody loved, and it was a return to form for JayZ. But his features gotten better, and he gotten more socially conscious. He started growing his hair out, and yeah, he just became a guy that mattered again. And I'm glad that he ended the decade well. Would have loved to hear more albums from JayZ, but at this point, I think he's 50 years old. I think, when he puts out a project, he's gonna do it on his own terms. But I'm gonna put him in the C tier because, like I said, the first half to me was not great, but the second half was pretty stellar. So, balance it out. All right, next one, Kanye. And Kanye has definitely had a very interesting decade. On and off music, for sure. A lot has happened. But, Kanye obviously started off with a bang with Fantasy, My Twisted Fantasy. And he, I think a lot of people would say that Fantasy is probably the most acclaimed record of the 2010s. And he came with Watch the Throne, which, like I said, not a project that I am in love with. But Yeezus came by, and I know Yeezus has this audience. I know people who love Yeezus. I just never got it. I just never got the appeal of the album. I still think it sucks, only aside from a couple of songs. And then Life of Pablo was I think was a bounce back album. I still enjoy Life of Pablo. And then he ended it with Yay, which was kind of like a fart in the wind. Probably only liked one track on that album, and Jesus is King. I mean, the less we say about that album, the better. But Kanye still was on the producing side, and he produced Daytona. He came with the Kids See Ghost project, which is one of my favorite Kanye projects overall, the collaboration he did with Kid Cudi. So it was kind of a mixed bag for Kanye. I mean, what can I say? He started off so well and then ended it so terribly. So, if I'm going to be honest here, I'm going to... this is hard. Now, I'll put on the B tier. I'll put on the B tier because he's had more albums that were good than bad. It's just the bad ones were just so forgettable for me. But, obviously, I can't deny the impact he's had on hip-hop. And he's been relevant throughout these 10 years. So I gotta give him some respect. Kendrick Lamar, coming of age of this decade. I mean, I'm just gonna put him in the S tier. The guy just did not miss at all. Starting out with the Overly Dedicated mixtape, the Section 80, Good Kid, Mad City, the Paper Butterfly, Untitled Unmastered, Damn, the Black Panther soundtrack. The guy didn't miss the whole damn decade. And the more the decade wore on, he got more popular. He's gonna be in the S tier. What can I say? Kid Cudi. Now, Kid Cudi, during this decade, listen, I'm not the biggest Kid Cudi fan, but I think Kid Cudi, it took a while for him to really find his voice. He did a lot of projects during this decade, stayed active, even acted a little bit, but there were projects that I liked, there were projects that I didn't like. Was it the Bullet to Heaven or something like that? Yeah, you can keep that. But I did kind of like Passion, Pain, and Demon Slayer. I thought I had a couple of good tracks there, especially with the Andre and Pharrell features. But I think it wasn't until the latter half of the decade where you began to hear his overwhelming influence on the young kids like Lil Uzi Vert's and Playboy Cardi's and NBA Youngboys and Travis Scott's, all saying that, Kid Cudi was their god. And, it was good to hear that Kid Cudi, towards the end of the decade, become popular again and collaborating with these younger artists and having a number one album for the first time in his career and having a number one song. I mean, I especially love this collaboration with Travis Scott. The Scotts, I think, is one of my favorite Travis Scott songs ever. I just think that song is amazing. Yeah, it was good. It was good to. I mean, even though I'm not a huge fan of Kid Cudi's music, I'm a fan of him as a person. I can acknowledge his influence on the younger rappers, and I especially love Kids See Ghosts. I think that's a masterpiece. So I'm gonna put him in the C tier. There are some projects that I like. There were some that I didn't. Next one, Lil Wayne. And Lil Wayne, I think, coming out with the Rebirth album, I think it was this decade, just a horrible album. Him trying to be the rock album. I just didn't even know what that was. The Carter 4, I thought had some good songs, but wasn't near the caliber of the Carter 3. And then he's come with the I Am Not a Human Being mixtapes, and I just felt at a point where Lil Wayne was just kind of losing himself, with the punchlines, and he just became a meme for the wrong reasons. And then I think, like I said, like JayZ, I think something within him clicked. His features on the title albums were great, and he just became a feature killer, and really just coming out, building this momentum up with the Carter 5, which I thought was a solid comeback for Lil Wayne. And Lil Wayne now established himself as one of the top rappers out there. So, like, the decade started off bad for Lil Wayne. He kind of started off as like a joke, but then at the end of the decade, gained respect again. So, I'm going to put him in the C tier. Alright, so we're going to talk about Logic, everybody's favorite punching bag, it seems. And, listen, I think Logic does get a hard time from a lot of people. I get, the biracial jokes, all that stuff, but I think he is a very talented rapper when he's not in his own head. And I think he had some solid projects. I love the Young Sinatra mixtapes. The Under Pressure album was a very solid project. Everybody, I thought there were some good songs there, but I think this is when you start to really see the pivot for Logic, because he came out with the Suicide song, and he just became all of a sudden like a huge success. The album went to number one, and he just started making, I don't know, he felt inclined to recreate the same type of songs over and over again. And then he started doing like the whole fast rapping thing, and it just became less about content and more about how fast of a rapper can I be. And just, why people got invested in Logic was the storytelling, the underdog story. And then once he became the top guy and coming with number one albums and top 10 singles, he started to lose himself. And he dropped Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, which I think is his worst project. Just probably one of the worst albums of 2019. Yeah, it just seemed like he felt, for a guy who was, literally under pressure, he was definitely feeling the pressure, and it kind of led to his retirement. Although I guess he's coming back, but for me, Logic, while he does have some talent, I think he kind of punched under his weight a little bit. So I'm gonna put him in the C tier. The next one, Lupe Fiasco. Now, Lupe Fiasco, I think for some of his fans, they would say he didn't miss. I think the Lasers project, it was very successful for him. I think it's probably his best-selling album, but I just don't think he felt comfortable in that sound with the whole electro pop. This was the age of like when dubstep and electro pop was popular, and Lupe tried to get on the wave. And I don't think he just didn't sound comfortable in that mode. But it sold well for him. And then he did the Food and Liquor album, which was kind of going back to the basics. But Tetsuo Youth, I think, is an amazing album. Drogas Wave, the Drogas Projects came out, and he did good with that. Lupe Fiasco is always an acquired taste. You either love him or you hate him. He is a great rapper, obviously. One of the best rappers, MCs out there. You can't deny his talent. But for me, it just doesn't warrant replay listens to me. I think the production, it's just not for me. Lupe, aside from the Lasers project, did put out solid output during this decade. So I'm gonna put on the beat tier. Next one, Mac Miller. Rest in peace, Mac Miller. Gone way too soon. A guy that, like many other rappers on this tier list, improved with time. He came out with Blue Slide Park, which was out of the gate #1 album, and he was kind of that frat boy rapper, the kid for the white frat boys and the college audience. But slowly but surely, you began to hear his production talents, and he's tried different things, and it got more intricate, and he started playing with different sounds. I especially enjoyed The Divine Feminine, which showed Mac playing with jazz rap sounds and neo soul sounds, and it's just a lovely album that I go back to. And Swimming, which was his last album, I think Mac, definitely was a guy that, I didn't see as much. I wasn't on the bandwagon like many of you guys were. I didn't really see it until after he passed, and then I realized, this kid was special, and I wish that he was able to mature even more, because I think that in the 2020s decade, he would have killed it. He would have put out so much better records, and I just feel like he was just getting there. But if I'm being honest, all of his albums didn't really hit for me, so I'm going to put him in the C tier. Next one, Macklemore, and another one that came out with The Heist, and I thought, The Heist is still a solid album, but came out with this Unruly Mess I Made. That's when you began to hear the cracks, and I think Macklemore got in his own head. He had incredible success with Thrift Shop and Can't Hold Us, even with the mixtapes that he did earlier in the decade, and Wings and White Walls. But once he got in pop, he just tried to stay in that lane and in Downtown and all those songs. It just didn't hit for me. And then he dropped Ryan Lewis and did Gemini, which I just think is an atrocious album. Just him completely abandoning the socio-political stuff that people love for him, and it just became like any other rapper. It just had no content. So I don't know what Macklemore. I did a video on Macklemore on this channel. Go check that out. We'll leave there's a link up top. Very disappointed on the way his career turned out. Where I thought that he was, when he came out, I thought, okay, this guy had something special here, and he was gonna, be this kind of socially conscious guy that, it was, very very woke to the point of like, all right, we get it, like, we get that you're woke, but like bullhorn wokeness, I call it. But at least it was something different. But now I don't know what to say about Macklemore, so I'm gonna put him in the D tier. Next one, Meek Mill. And Meek Mill, I think, started off the decade, I was never really a fan of his. I just thought that he shouted too much. And then his 2015 album, aside from the song Rico, I just could do without. Then, the DC4 mixtape came out, and I'm not gonna lie, I think DC4 was a pretty solid mixtape. And then, Meek Mill, as we all know, went to jail and, kind of hit a new level of stardom. I think people who weren't even into hip-hop gravitated towards Meek Mill. Even Robert Kraft from the Patriots gravitated toward Meek Mill, and when he got out of jail, he just had a newfound level of popularity, and I think he got a whole new audience. Am I gonna say that Meek Mill is just like, he's like Kendrick Lamar now, and he's like totally woke? And it's like, no. I mean, Meek sticks to his lane. He does what he does best. and that's what he does. He has a couple of songs that I've liked over the years, but I just never really loved the full project from Meek, so I'm gonna put him in the C tier. But I will say that he ended the decade better than what he started, so he's showing some growth. Next one, Nas, and yeah, this was kind of like, so he's going in his third decade, and came out with Life Is Good, and then Nasir. So he didn't really put out too much projects. He did some features. The great feature on the DJ Khaled's Major Key album, Nas Album Done, which later turned out to be Nasir, which is, in my opinion, just a forgettable album. Life Is Good was interesting, but not up to the par that Nas had on his previous 2 decades. So, if I'm being honest, quite disappointed with Nas during this decade. He came back with King's Disease, but that was in 2020. Yeah, Nas just didn't really put out a lot during this decade. So I'm gonna put him in the D tier. I mean, sorry, I gotta do it. Gotta be honest. Nicki Minaj came of age during this decade with the Pink Friday, album, which was a huge success for her, and then just had a slew of big hits, Super Bass. Do I listen to full Nicki projects? No, but I do think that when she is in features and she can be entertaining when she wants to be. I don't like her doing the pop stuff, but when she came out with the Monster feature on Fantasy, it put her on the map, and I think that's when I love Nicki the most, when she's on her rap and shit. But I think for her, I just would have wished, kind of like Drake, I just would have wished for solid rapping, this is why I'm a spitter, because I think Nicki Minaj has talent, but I just think that she tried to hit for the radio too many times. But she's had some singles that I've loved. Chun-Li is a song that I've loved. Wish I would have had more of that Nicki. But for what she did for her career, can't lie. She's had a very successful career. So I'm gonna put her in the C tier. Next one, Pusha T, and I think Pusha T, coming out of the Clips good music realm, did not expect for him to have this type of solo career. I mean, really, every project that he has put out during this decade is better than the last. With the Wrath of Kane mixtape to My Name Is My Name in 2013, which I thought was a solid project. Then topping it with King Push, Darkest Before Dawn. Then topping it again with Daytona. And then we all know about the Drake diss and him becoming the president of good music. I mean, Pusha T did not miss this entire decade. Just a solid decade. So I'm going to put him in the S tier. Phenomenal decade. Yeah. Rick Ross. Now, Rick Ross, once again, not the biggest fan of his, but I do love him on features. I think that Rick Ross is a very, I don't know, underrated, but I guess in my sense, Rick Ross is one of the best feature killers in hip-hop. I just think that he can just go on anybody's album and just add so much to their sound. Collaborating with Denzel Curry, Kanye West, Drake. It doesn't matter. He can collaborate with anybody and just kill it. I just wish that his albums had a lot more to offer. Now, Teflon Don was I think was a solid project. Rather You Than Me was also okay. But, Rick Ross, if you're a fan of his, you're going to be a fan of his for life. He gives you the goods. He doesn't try to experiment too much from the formula. He sticks to the formula and he delivers. And if you like that, then you like it. If you don't, then whatever. I think Rick Ross, because he's been so great on features during this decade, I am going to put him in the B tier. Schoolboy Q, and I became a huge fan of Schoolboy Q. Saw him live during this decade. Habits of Contradictions, I think, is a solid project. Setbacks. Starting with Setbacks. And then Habits of Contradictions. And then To Oxymoron became a number one album. An album that I love. And then he Blank Face LP, which I think is the best album in his career. One of my favorite rap albums of the past decade. A great experimental hip-hop album. Schoolboy Q at his best, at his wildest. Crash Talk came out, and I was very disappointed in this album. Aside from a couple of songs, Num Num Juice is still a banger, but I just wish that. Yeah, I know it wasn't gonna be Blank Face, but Crash Talk was kind of a letdown. So I think Schoolboy right now is at a crossroads in his career. Hopefully he can bounce back with his next project. But I think up until that point, still a very solid career. Wish that Crash Talk was better, but I'm gonna put him in the B tier. If Crash Talk was just as good as Blank Face, I easily would have put him in the A tier, easily. Next one, Tyler the Creator. Aside from 2 Chainz, probably the one who has won my heart over the most during this decade. Did not fuck with Odd Future when they came out. Did not fuck with Yonkers or Goblin. I still think Goblin's not a great album. But, during the middle of the decade, went back and listened to Bastard. But that came out in 2009, so I can't include it in this. But, yeah, not a fan of Goblin. Then, went back and listened to Flower Boy. And that was really the first album where I really turned Tyler got into my good graces. I'm like, okay, there's something here. There's potential here. So after Flower Boy came out, I went back and listened to all of his old projects. And Wolf I think was a slightly mature effort than Goblin. Cherry Bomb, there's some songs that I like, but as Tyler would say himself, it was shifty. But Flower Boy is when it all came together for him, and still an amazing album. I think most Tyler fans would say that's their favorite album. Igor, to me, is my favorite Tyler album, and that's when he completely won me over, even though it was completely different from all his other albums previously. Just a very neo-soul, poppy album, best rap album Grammy. So, and Tyler had a #1 album, sold out the Garden, as he explains a lot in this new album. And yeah, I think seeing what Tyler has been able to do in this decade, he's evolved so much, and he's gotten a lot of controversies, and obviously he has definitely divided a lot of people in hip hop. But I love the fact that Tyler has his own niche. He does what he does, and he's gonna do it his way. And I think he's evolved immensely as a rapper, as a producer, pulling in different sounds. And hearing his latest album that came out a couple weeks ago, he's gonna have a pretty solid 2020s. So I think for the most part, Tyler had a great decade. So I'm going to put him in the B tier. Next one, Wale. And we're wrapping up soon. We got a couple rappers left. So Wale, he's a guy that, once again, I can acknowledge that he's a talent. I saw him live. It wasn't the best concert. But, Wale, I think, is a little underrated. But once again, I just wish that his albums were better. He kind of punched under his weight a little bit. Now, I think the best album was the Seinfeld album that came out in the album about nothing. Was a decent project, but for the most part, Wale's studio projects didn't really do it for me. I think he's good on some features, but he's just not my cup of tea. I think that I credit him for being somewhat relevant during this decade. Yeah, just not the type of quality output that I would have expected from him during this decade. So I'm going to put him in the C tier. Last but not least, Wiz Khalifa. Now, he came out of the gate like Mac, coming from Pittsburgh with the black and yellow. Huge #1 hit, 2011 with the Rolling Papers, which was, a decent project. And then he came with Black Hollywood and, with the Hold Up song, which I still think is a pretty solid banger. But obviously his biggest song of this decade was See You Again with Charlie Puth, which is a song that, you heard it like a million times. Like I just can't listen to it anymore. It's just like I just can't, And yes, it is a tribute song to Paul Walker. I get it, but I just can't listen to that song anymore. It's just too much. It was just on the radio ad nauseum for that period, and they play on the radio. It's just I just can't listen to it anymore. But it did a lot for his career. Obviously, it got him in circles that he wasn't able to get previously. But for the most part, Wiz has kind of been silent during the latter half of the decade. Wiz is just never been my cup of tea. It's just never really been for me. But he's had some songs that I've liked, but yeah, just not for me. So yeah, that's my best rappers of 2010, my tier list. Tell me what you think in the comment section. Am I right? Am I way off? YouTube recommends these 2 hour videos. I've done a bunch of these tier lists, so check them out. Till next time, love you guys. Peace.